everyone, and welcome on board Yoshi. I've got a really exciting episode today where I'm going to take you through our boat buying process. So how did we find Yoshi from those thousands of boats out there in the market? I'm going to take you through the different websites that I used. What did we want in a yacht as a family? All right, so the requirements, the nice to haves, the must haves, and those type of boats that we just weren't interested in. What did the market teach us? I spent over 2 years researching boats. Is it a buyer's market, a seller's market? How did we get ready for the leap from looking online to actually putting an offer in and it getting accepted? And then what were some of the lessons we learned along the way? There were lots of them. We made a few mistakes, but overall we were happy with our purchase. So the boat selection process took us probably 2.5 years. I used to look every day online for at least half an hour. So much so that my wife started getting sick of it. I used to talk about boats, dream about boats, and I think I got a pretty good feeling by the end of which boat we wanted and how much we were willing to pay. So online I used YachtWorld a lot. The app is very good. You can save boats on that, but also the website, and I'll show you in a second how I use the website. I also use the Band of Boats. There's the Yachtco website, Simpson Marine, and some other local websites around the world, in Europe especially, where I searched. But YachtWorld was probably 90% of where I searched for Yoshi. So let's jump in now and take a look at how I used YachtWorld to find our boat. So here we are on YachtWorld. I must have spent half an hour every day for 2 or 3 years searching YachtWorld and a few of the other sites which we'll mention in a minute. So what did I do here? I used to go to sailboats and put in the different filters. I did find, however, that the hand phone app was a little bit better. You could save the boats in your favorites list that you were really interested in. I'm not sure you can do that using the website version. I used to filter on both new and used boats. Class, we were only interested in catamarans. The make, initially not so important, but towards the last 2 or 3 months before we wanted to make a decision, we did have 4 or 5 different makes that we wanted, just to help narrow down that process in terms of being able to buy one. If not, there are so many different brands out there, it becomes quite hard. And that process of narrowing it down is quite hard. There are so many great brands on the market today. Price range, we were looking at about 400,000 as a minimum. Maximum for us was about 800,000, but I used to put 900,000 in here. All right, just to leave a bit of room for negotiation. I didn't want a boat older than 15 years, ideally. And the length size, we wanted 45 foot as the minimum. So I just put 44 in here, a little bit less. And a maximum length of 60 foot. To me, anything over 60 foot becomes a crude boat, or you need to be very experienced, probably both husband and wife, or the whole family. In our case, my wife and my kids have sailed, but not enough to get a boat from over 60 foot. If something goes wrong and you need to get that main up manually, you need enough power to be able to do that. All right. So we limited ourselves to 60 foot. And also the price range, right? If you go much above that, you're not going to be able to find one for under 900,000 that's less than 15 years old. So I used to search on those type of parameters. Most of the time I filtered on new to old, and you can see here, these are the featured listings. All right, and then the actual sorting comes here, I believe, where the newest listings pop up. I used to log on in the mornings and see what came up in the search that had been listed overnight and look for things like price drops. So after 2 or 3 years, I knew lots of the boats, which ones had decreased their prices, which ones had sold, etc. So probably one of the primary sources that I use for buying a boat, or at least finding a boat. So apart from searching online, there's a number of other things we did as a family to make sure that we were going to get the right boat for us. One of which was renting boats in different locations around the world, different types of boats, to ensure we liked it. So when we found a boat that we really liked, and you can normally only do this with production boats, I would highly recommend that you go and rent one for a week. You will find out very soon in that rental whether you like it or don't like it. All right. One time we rented one, we thought this was going to be the boat. We're going to go and buy one. It had a forward-facing kitchen, and after using it for a couple of days, we quickly found that that was not for us. All right, it just didn't work. It sounded fantastic, but it didn't work for us. Also, boat shows are a great place to help with your boat selection process. And I'm not so much talking about going to see all the new fancy boats there, which is great. You can see what's on the market. But for us, we found the most value in talking with people there. We've made some good friends recently, this year's boat show, who gave us some fantastic advice in terms of which boats to buy from their experience. These are people who have sailed around the world, have done what we want to do, what to look out for in a second-hand boat, those type of things. So highly recommend go to boat shows and just talk to people. Talk to the vendors, talk to the customers there. That was probably my number one thing for boat selection, and it really helped us. Viewings. So don't just select the boat and put an offer in on it. Select many boats and go and see them. All right, either use your broker or call up the number next to the boat listing and go and see that boat. We did this, and the number of boats that we saw that I thought this is the boat for us. And when you go and see it, the actual boat is very different to the listing. The pictures are different, and above that, you just can't get a feel for the space, the size, those type of things online. So just to help you narrow down what you want, what you don't want, go and see boats. See as many as you can. I know it's time consuming, sometimes expensive if you need to travel, but it's better to do that up front and rule out boats than make the wrong decision. And on that, after I would say 18 months, my wife got sick of me talking about I want this boat, I want this boat. So she made me narrow it down to 3 to 5 different boats in terms of brands and makes that we were going to look at as a family, and kind of rule out everything else. And that really helped us just in that final stage to get the boat we wanted. Next, we'll have a look at our yacht requirements. So these are the must-haves, nice-to-haves, and will-not-haves that we were looking for as a family of 4 when we were purchasing our first boat. The biggest decision was how many cabins to have. We are planning on having a lot of friends and family join us. And the kids wanted their own bedrooms. So having 4 cabins was the absolute minimum that we wanted. And 5 was very much nice to have. I love windsurfing, kite surfing, winging, stand-up paddleboarding, you name it. So having sufficient storage for water toys was also very important to us. The boat needed to be safe and well built from a reputable manufacturer. And it also needed to have a lot of manufacturer support. After speaking to friends who have done this before, who have sailed around the world, if you're stuck in a remote location, you need to be able to call the manufacturer to make sure that you're getting the right part and rely on their support. So that was a must-have for us. In terms of nice-to-haves, performance, look, I love speed, I love fast sailing. So if we could have a more sporty performance daggerboard cat, that was very much a nice-to-have. But it's a trade-off, as you all know, versus the size of the rooms, the size of the living quarters, those type of things. The resale value, you'll never make money on a boat, so this was a nice to have that we're going to be able to resell it. I think for Yoshi, it's a little bit of a specialized boat, being up there in the 57-foot, quite large boat. So resale value, important, but not a must-have. Look, we're planning on using it for a few years, and hopefully, after all the upgrades, we will get that resale value. The forward-facing kitchen that I touched on earlier originally was a must-have, and that kind of moved to a nice-to-have after chartering a few different boats with it. It's nice, but I wouldn't say any better than a aft-facing kitchen. We looked at new and used boats, and I'll talk about this a little bit later in the video. So a new boat, very much nice to have. And in terms of size, around about the 48 to 52 foot mark was in the nice to have. Definitely wanted something bigger than 44, and 60 foot was probably the maximum that I felt comfortable with handling with the family. Unfortunately, monohulls don't make our list. My wife gets seasick, and we just need the space that a catamaran provides. So that's a will not have. We were looking at boats less than 15 years old. Personally, in terms of flybridge and outboard helms, this is something that I would not have on my boat. They are fantastic, a flybridge if you're doing coastal cruising, but if you're in the middle of the Atlantic and a storm comes up doing a night watch, I just would not want to be on a flybridge, or I would not want to put my family up on a flybridge away from the rest of the crew if I'm sleeping. And similarly, those outboard helms, great in nice weather, but I could not imagine doing that in 6, 8, 10 meter seas in a storm. So I ruled those out. And in terms of the minimum size, as I mentioned earlier, 44 foot was about the minimum size that we were after. So a few other considerations. We were looking at both new and used. Both have pros and cons. They both need shakedowns. You can't buy a new boat and then expect to use it immediately. They will have problems. Every new boat will have problems. But you get a great, obviously, manufacturer support and warranty on that. But you pay a premium. The depreciation in the first couple of years, like cars, is going to be higher on a new boat. So we weren't too fussy whether it was going to be a new boat or a used boat. Budget and location. As I mentioned earlier, our budget was quite wide. We wanted the right boat up to about the 800,000 mark. And location, we weren't so picky. Ideally, it was in the Med, and we did find a boat there, but we were looking all over the world, the US. The Pacific was probably lower on our list just because of the remoteness, and with the family not being so experienced, I wanted to have more support around me when we first started to sail. Using a boat broker, I would recommend this. It worked out nicely for us. They get paid by the seller typically. All right, so it didn't cost us anything to have that. Understand the market. All right. I guess after doing research for 2 years, speaking to people, speaking to brokers, speaking to people who have sailed around the world too, people who are buying boats, who are selling boats, you kind of get a good feel for the market. I think at the moment we're definitely in a buyer's market. All right, so don't be afraid to put in those lower offers. There's a lot of boats, from my perspective out there, that are overpriced. They've still got COVID pricing in them. Perhaps they were bought high and the owner doesn't want to lose so much money. So now let's look at the offer process of taking the leap and making an offer to the seller for our first boat. So we found Yoshi online at the Yacht Co website, and she matched our requirements. Maybe a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit older, but nonetheless a beautiful boat. And we were very interested in it. My wife Serene loved it, I loved it, and the kids loved it. So we contacted our broker to ask for more photos, for some answers to questions that we had on the boat that weren't addressed in the listing. And coincidentally, the seller's broker and for us, our buyer's broker, were from the same company. So it made it a lot easier and a lot quicker to get a lot of information about the boat. We've then advised, once we decided to put an offer in, to put a written offer in before viewing the boat. So I guess maybe typically if you're in the same location, you'd go and view the boat first and then put an offer in. But as the boat was in Europe and we were in Singapore, we were advised before flying there to see it to put an offer in, which we did. However, it was subject to viewing, so liking the boat, subject to a sea trial, and subject to the survey. So we could get out of the contract if we didn't like the boat, basically. So we put an offer in and then negotiated with the seller on the dollar value, some of the terms of the sale, and came to an agreement. So the next step was to sign a sales and purchase agreement, which was a 4 or 5 page legal document, and then transfer to an escrow account a 10% deposit. So that was a little bit nerve-wracking, considering we hadn't seen the boat. However, 7 days later, we were on a plane and went to see Yoshi in Montenegro. We'd lined up in that 7 days prior a sea trial and survey, which we did a couple of days after landing there. And no surprise, there were a couple of issues. I would not imagine that there would be any survey where there are no issues. So we went back to the seller, renegotiated some of the terms and finances before going unconditional. So at that stage where it's unconditional, neither the seller nor the buyer can get out of the contract. I then had a couple of weeks before settlement, and in that time I lined up insurance and we decided on where to flag the boat and started that flagging process. And I'll talk about those two things very shortly. Transferred the balance payment, again, to the escrow account, ready for the settlement. And then as part of the settlement process, you get the bill of sale. And that's when you're officially the owner of the boat. And in that process, there were a number of lessons learned, which I'll cover now. So if you look through the whole process, there were a number of key considerations, and I'm just going to touch on some of the key ones now. Insurance. This was my first boat purchase. I had no idea how much insurance was going to cost. So I got out there early when I liked Yoshi online and started to get some quotes. And I'm really glad that I did. Was it going to be 1, 2, 3%? I have no idea. The brokers were saying it was going to be 1 to 1.5%, but I just didn't want to leave anything to chance. If it was 3%, that's a huge amount of money each year to be spending. Ultimately, though, it was about 1% for us with the experience that we have as a family. I would recommend doing it even maybe before you see your boat, especially if you need to fly, because once you go unconditional, from unconditional to settlement, it can be quite fast, depending on how you negotiate. You're talking 2, maybe 3 weeks. Flagging was troublesome and complicated. We used a lawyer in the end. I'm very glad that we did. Lots of documentation that you have to get absolutely right. So yes, use a lawyer on that one would be my recommendation. Transferring large sums of money takes time. We had to go to the bank because where we live, we couldn't do that amount of money online. Using a lawyer. The seller's broker and our broker were the same. So in the end, we decided not to use a lawyer. If that was not the case, I would have used a lawyer. It's just not worth, in my mind, given the amounts of money, leaving anything to chance or getting it wrong. All right, the contracts, the money, use a lawyer, and unless, as per our situation, it was the same company and a very reputable company too. And lastly, the time it all takes. It probably took us 3 weeks from start to finish every day to buy Yoshi. So make sure you've got the time set aside to do this properly. It's a huge purchase. So now let's look at some of the training that I did to get myself ready as the skipper of the boat with my family for sailing around the world. There are numerous courses out there. I would say experience counts for 90%, but to get the experience in real life, sometimes hard, so highly recommend doing some of the online or face-to-face courses. And I'll just take you through now some of the courses that I did to get ready. One of which was the RYA Yachtmaster. So this is a professional qualification to prove to myself that I knew what I was doing as a skipper. So I got that this year. You need a certain number of miles to qualify and very rigorous tests. So there's a theory component and there's a practical component of that with the RYA. The theory component I did with Ardent Training. I think they're a UK-based company, all online, absolutely fantastic. Very responsive to any questions you have, very good video tutorials on what you're doing. So the theory part there, and then I went to Australia and did my practical exam, where they test you for 2 days with an examiner on anything and everything to do with managing a boat, sailing a boat. You have to sail onto a dock, sail onto mooring buoys, man overboard, night navigation, you name it, they can test it. So it's a very high level qualification, and it wasn't so much for the qualification, it was to give me the confidence that I can skipper the boat with my family on board. The other parts were the mechanical, so the electronics on the boat. Wasn't so confident in that, so I searched for different courses and came across Boat How To, a game online, fantastic course. Took about 5-6 weeks doing this part-time, an hour or two a day, and by the end of it, I think I know enough to kind of start troubleshooting along the boat if things happen, but really just trying to start that journey to knowing the boat inside and out, because if something breaks, I need to fix it. I also did a diesel course. This was a 5-day face-to-face course. We pulled apart an engine and put it back together. Again, an area where in the middle of the ocean, you need to fix it. You can't call a mechanic. So now I'm a lot more confident that I can at least try to troubleshoot if there is an issue. However, being on a catamaran, I think we're fairly lucky that we do have 2 engines. So if one does break and you can't fix it, we do have a backup. Charters, as I mentioned earlier in the video, we have done a number of charters of family. And I did the 23-24 Clip Around the World race. I participated in 2 legs to give me experience in ocean sailing. So high wind, high wave sailing. We were in 70 knots, 8-10 meter waves. I was skippering a monohull at 21 knots. Absolutely fantastic. We sailed from South Africa to Australia, and then I joined them again and crossed the Atlantic, Washington to Scotland to England. Highly recommend it if you want some ocean sailing experience. So these are just some of the things that I did. There's a lot of learning and training, but just getting on a boat, as I mentioned, I would say that's 90% of it. Just the more you're on a boat, the more you learn. That's real experience. The other courses kind of just supplement the knowledge. So now let's look at some of the lessons learned and things we would potentially do differently if we had the chance again. So one of the key lessons is be aligned as a family. Now, I tried to do this, but it's critical that when you're buying the boat, that it's a compromise between every family member who's going to be on that boat. All right. I couldn't get my performance boat with narrow hulls. We needed more bedrooms, but we compromised, and I got a bigger sail and a bigger boat to give me that speed, for example. Research. Don't jump in. Don't go buy a boat tomorrow if you haven't been doing your research, and learn from others. As I mentioned earlier, I think one of the most valuable parts of the whole process has been speaking to people who have done this before and who have boats. You can read lots of articles online, but speaking with people will give you the real insights. Boats are illiquid assets. Take your time throughout the process. Don't jump in, and trust me, be prepared to walk away, especially if it's a buyer's market. The seller will be more desperate than you are to make the transaction work. So if it doesn't work, you can move on to the next boat. Have a backup that you're equally excited about. Boats cost more than you think. Make sure that you budget well. So we thought we could get away with maybe 10% over the purchase price to refit and get it ready. That refit's happening now, and I think we're at least 20% on top of the purchase price. I'll do a video after this in terms of what that refit looks like, but really make sure you know how much the boat's going to cost you, not just to maintain, but to run, the fuel costs. We've had numerous surprises on how expensive boats are, boat parts are, etc. And lastly, charter before you buy if you can. If it's a production boat, I highly recommend doing this. View as many boats as you can. Go see them. Even if you don't think that's the boat for you, it may be, and that will really help you find what you like and what you don't like. And then you can create that requirements list on must-haves, nice-to-haves, will-not-haves, and really help you narrow down that boat buying process. And that was the Yoshi boat buying process. It was a long process, a thoroughly enjoyable process along the way. It did have its ups and downs, but we got there in the end. And we're really looking forward now to moving on to the next stage, which is refitting Yoshi. So fixing things, upgrading things on the boat. We have about 100 items on the list, and it's growing by the day. Here are some photos on things that we're fixing. We'll keep you posted along the way, so hit that subscribe button. We will move on to the boat in February. Yoshi's currently on the dry dock in Montenegro, undergoing that refit process. After February, we plan on spending a month or two as a family getting used to the boat, so going on little sails for the day or overnight. And in April, we plan to then set sail. Croatia, Greece, we're undecided yet. So hit the subscribe button and we'll keep you posted.